So kind of getting into the next step, kind of talking about some of the common stage one. I've kind of talked about this a little bit, so I'm just going to kind of gloss over it. But you can get kind of information from this from web history, log files, email entries. This would be kind of the thing, you know, the kind of the initial infection, right? Somebody clicked on the link, somebody opened the attachment or whatever else, right? This can be kind of the initial stage that's going to lead to the exploit taking place, right? So kind of this is something that I've kind of pushed kind of for the last few days. But eventually we want to be able to correlate kind of some of this stuff with our disk forensics, right? My point of this whole kind of class is not to say like here's the disk image, go look at it. It's to say that here are some beneficial, some other items that can be beneficial that you can use to kind of focus your analysis in the disk image. I mean, think about this. We haven't actually looked at the disk contents other than the registry and the timeline stuff, right? We haven't actually looked through it in NCase or FTK through any disk contents. And think about the things that we found so far, right? We found a couple, applications that are, probably rootkits. We found something that looks like it might be a backdoor remote shell. We found a network sniffer on the system. We found this other application, MS Build, which has an outbound connection. We found this kind of weird command shell, which we don't know that much about, and some various files that are on the operating system. We also found potentially the attack vector in the log files and looking, or in the application event logs, looking at MySQL and that XP command shell, right? Whole bunch of other things that we found probably along the way as well, right? So it's like we haven't even looked at a disk image yet, but we have a pretty good idea of what went on in the system, what files are bad, what activity may have been conducted, and things like that. And we also have some potential, kind of bad actors, right, on that 138 and 200 IP addresses. So eventually, I guess my point is like as we get this information, we're going to be kind of using those pieces to kind of focus our disk analysis, right? So we don't need to look. I don't want to say we don't want to look at the entire thing, right? Because you want to be able to kind of be flexible in your analysis, but we can use those to kind of focus our analysis initially and kind of expand from there. So we're not just trying to like click through the entire file structure, but we can focus in on these paths that we're interested in or on these files that we're interested in. And really the point is to kind of use this to narrow our search, whether they be through keyword searches or actually navigating through the file system. You can kind of perform that step. And if we can identify kind of the first stage, it usually gives us kind of a timeline of initial infection, and we can kind of go from there. Again, kind of focusing our analysis. I do want to point out that antivirus can be helpful, right? It can identify some files that can give us an indicator of, perhaps where we want to start our analysis if we couldn't find anything else elsewhere. Certainly isn't something that we, want to ignore completely. Although, be aware of its limitations. Thank you very much. And also using the information from the IT staff, right? The information that they identify, or whoever identified the incident, right? How did you identify it? Why was this abnormal to you? Why did this stand out to you? So on and so forth, right? And also, I should have down here, like, what actions did they perform? Did they do anything to try to mitigate the incident? Did they run any applications, and so on and so forth? Did they remove anything, or anything like that? Kind of antivirus logs can be helpful. They can give you some investigative leads, sometimes a start point. So maybe the active antivirus isn't going to identify things, but the logs can give you some older information about files that previously were on the system. And this is important, right? Because if something was caught by AV and then quarantined or deleted or whatever, right? Like it might not be on the system anymore, but that doesn't mean that it wasn't executed, right? Well, I actually had a case one time that was really interesting, was that it was a PDF exploit. Someone had downloaded like they clicked on a link and they got like a bad PDF file, right? A malicious PDF file. And the antivirus caught it immediately. But the PDF had already been run, right? So it's like antivirus caught it, but it caught it because it had been run, right? I mean, it's like that was basically the reason. So it's like, although antivirus caught it immediately, the exploit had already taken place. So, and that, finding that PDF and kind of understanding that like that was the initial infection at least kind of gave us some leads, a domain to go look at, and so on and so forth. So, using this can give you a time element and things like that. And, of course, an allocated space can be helpful, too. You may want to look for, kind of deleted log files and stuff like that from older log entries. So here's just kind of like a quick example. Here's the malware bytes log. But you see kind of a number of different entries here, right? Kind of these crazy paths with some crazy executable names. Whatever this these files are, and so on and so forth. If nothing else, this may give you a time element that you can kind of look at, as well as some files that you may want to check out if they still happen to reside on the system.